Disclaimer, I was a beta tester for this game, and received a copy for free. I've decided that my New Year's tradition is going to be to review a game at the start of every year. This year, I wanted to take a look at a game called Demon Slayer Akagi, a game made by indie dev Cookie and their team. You play as Akagi as she goes around the world trying to subdue demonic objects. Cookie often participates in Touhou game jams, and you can see a lot of Touhou influence in this game, especially the gameplay. As you've probably noticed, Demon Slayer Akagi takes a lot of inspiration from the very first Touhou game, highly responsive to prayers. Both games are a sort of hybrid of Danmaku and Bullet Hell. They're also both very arcadey in nature, with the focus on scoring. But, while highly responsive to prayers is very much a game from 1995, Demon Slayer Akagi has a lot of features that help to bring this style of game into the modern era. First, I'll talk about presentation. The game makes use of pixel art, and it looks pretty good. The art's not going to blow your mind in terms of visuals, but it excels in another, more important area: game feel. Akagi's sword strike is nice and fluid, so you know that you're going to hit the ball. Projectiles also don't blend in with the background, so you know what to dodge. The graphics feel geared specifically towards gameplay, which I like. That's not to say that there aren't any visual elements that don't stand out. There's a cool effect when you use one of Akagi's special attacks with a superpower. And her dash move is also particularly nice to look at. There is one graphical area where I think the game could look a bit better though. Demon Slayer Akagi has a really cool concept. Various types of demonic objects have possessed people across the world, but the demonic objects that possess each person grant them powers based on that area's culture. China grants a girl the powers of Sun Wukong, and America grants a girl the powers of an alien. This idea of traveling the world is really well done and communicated well, except for two areas, I'd argue. While places like Egypt and Area 51 look pretty distinct, I think China and South America could have used a bit more graphical variety. They feel more generic than the other levels. That's a fairly small complaint though, and again, most of the focus was on game feel. Accompanying all the levels are music. The music serves each level well, and there's a few tracks that are pretty catchy. My favorite is the track for Area 51. It combines both Wild West-style whistling and chiptune to convey the idea of an alien base in the middle of the desert. Of course, you can't have a game like this without the gameplay. This is where the game excels the most in my opinion. As stated before, the game takes a lot of inspiration from Touhou 1. The goal of each stage is to break panels with a ball. You can hit the ball with your character's sword, but if you're not careful, the ball itself can hurt you. While you're sending the ball up, you also have to dodge obstacles the stage throws at you. This sword strike grants nice control of the ball, as shown by the guiding lines that appear when the ball approaches. This game does not have Touhou 1's player bullets, which on the surface might seem like a limiting factor in terms of when you can hit the ball. A flying bullet can go forever. A sword strike is limited to where the character is on screen. But Akagi has a pretty nifty double jump. This allows you to hit the ball from the air with a sick spin sword slash, and it also allows for you to play around with the ball's horizontal momentum in addition to its vertical momentum. But you have to be careful with air slash. Using it recklessly can result in death. These changes to how the player interacts with the ball already grant a lot more control than Touhou 1, but there's one addition that I think goes above and beyond: the targeting ability. By holding down up on the D-pad, the player can target the closest block towards them. Doing this makes clearing the stage easier, but it's also harder to keep a combo, so the player scores less points. This avoids the age-old problem of breakout games: what to do when there's one block left. If not handled right, the player can be stuck on the last few blocks for a while, continually bouncing the ball back and forth. The target reticle allows all stages to move by fairly quickly, aiding the game's pacing a ton. In addition, targeting hurting your overall scoring in the stage incentivizes players to only use it at the end of a stage, or to make some strategic maneuvers with it. Then there's the actual levels. The obstacles the game throws at you are pretty interesting. There's bullets to dodge, spikes that can land on the floor, and even things that can trap the ball. Though, I do think that the bigger gimmicks can be a bit much at times. Take these teleporters for example. They shoot the ball back and forth. And again. And again. It broke the pacing a bit. Again, these gimmicks aren't bad, it's just something I think could be fine-tuned a bit. Another thing about this game. It's hard. That's not a bad thing, just something to have a heads up on. This game will test your reaction timing with the ball, as well as your skills in dodging bullets. The mix of both of these leads to a pretty frantic experience in the later levels, and offers a nice challenge. And to help you on your quest, you can choose between 3 demon powers. These are essentially shot types. One gives you a dash that acts like Reimu's slide kick from Touhou 1, one lets you charge up your sword to unleash the ball farther, and the final one grants you a teleport that you can place down. Each one also comes with a superpower that acts like a bomb from Touhou, only much cooler. For example, the superpower for the teleport grants you a second ball. This can be really good for scoring and clearing the game faster, but it's also much harder to control and easy to die with if you're reckless. These powers also play well with different playstyles, like shot types. The dash's power grants you fast movement, with its superpower granting you a period of invincibility. If you want to focus on survivability like I do, this power works pretty well. Finally, there's scoring. As mentioned before, using your target will reduce the amount of points you get. Instead, pulling off combos with the ball will let your score go up. Getting better scores with each playthrough is pretty satisfying. For some players. I'm one of those, but I know not everyone cares about score. This game only has 6 worlds, each containing around 2 to 7 stages depending on what difficulty you're playing on. It's fun to gradually master the game's mechanics and to see your score go up, but if you care mainly about the base length of the game rather than replayability in this form, then you might think the game's campaign is too short. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with thinking that way, it's more so just the amount of value you'll get from this game depends on the type of player you are. Nevertheless, the game's mechanics and options create a gameplay experience that's very enjoyable. Next, I want to talk about bosses. I didn't talk about these in gameplay, because you can't really talk about the bosses without mentioning their presentation at the same time. As mentioned before, this game is based around different types of demons across different cultures. You, ironically, fight an angel, for example. The bosses are also where most of this game's writing is. There's a few funny lines that give a chuckle here and there, but like Touhou, the writing doesn't really leave a good impression of the characters most of the time. Instead of through writing, the game likes to describe its characters through gameplay. You get a ringmaster who uses pink dolphins to attack. Or you have your older sister using the power pole to force you onto one side of the screen. The boss's personalities shine a lot more through their fights rather than their dialogue. Unfortunately, this means that the game's actual story can be a bit forgettable. But, since the game's main focus is on gameplay, it's not a huge deal. Speaking of gameplay, the bosses are pretty fun. The aforementioned different attacks are fun to deal with, and the targeting reticle also makes sure that the bosses aren't too frustrating to hit. You can also hit the bosses with your sword, which generally deals more damage, but is also riskier due to you then being closer to the boss's attacks. And then there's how the bosses look and sound. The designs look pretty nice. I especially love the alien girl. For their music, each boss gets their own theme. I'd say I remember the stage themes more than the boss themes, but there's still some cool moments. I like how the Angel's theme starts out graceful, but then drops to heavy rock as the fight ramps up. All in all, the game combines a ton of components to create fun bosses. Finally, there's the extra modes. Even though the main campaign is pretty short, there's still quite a bit to do outside of it. There's a ton of different challenge modes that test your skills in different areas. For example, one sees you dodging arrows that bounce around the screen, while another has you hitting targets by bouncing off your ball to get them. Your scores are saved for each challenge too. In addition, you can practice each individual stage in the game, including their various difficulties, and save high scores for each one. It's always nice when a game throws in some bonus content. Demon Slayer Akagi is a fun modernization of an older game's system that also has its own identity. Nice theming and creative bosses help the game's world stand out, even if the writing can be a bit generic. The game's presentation helps mainly to elevate the game's feel, but there are a few standout moments in both art and sound. The game also offers quite a few extras, and features a scoring system to help encourage replayability. Importantly, however, the game's mechanics make it extremely satisfying to play, and grant the skilled player a lot of control over the ball in every level. And this is without mentioning one of the game's most enticing pulls. It's only $5 on Steam. So, if you're craving for a game that plays like Touhou 1, or if you want a fun arcade-style game, or if you want to support an indie developer, then I highly recommend Demon Slayer Akagi.